right. Well, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the world's most exciting classroom. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. We've got a lot to catch up on today in one of our 30-minute summer editions of the world's most exciting classroom. So from about now until the second week of September, we're going to have these little 30-minute world's most exciting classrooms. We'll catch up with the ship. We'll have guest speakers. We'll have Darwin leaders join us from around the world. And then we'll get more into the full-on hour-long events when September hits again. So the first thing we need to do is catch up on where the ship is. Where is the Oosterschelde? So I'm going to share my screen here and we'll take a little look. I started with a nice far out view today. Maybe I'll see if I can just bump it up a little bigger. There we go. So we can see a nice far out view of a nice big portion of our planet. And let's move over a little bit. And let's see where we are. So if I zoom in a little bit, there we go. You can see where we have left Mangareva. And we are now making our way across open Pacific to some of these beautiful coral atolls you can see coming up, making our way to Papeete. So we still have a ways to go. There's a few images that have come through recently. So if we take a look at a couple of them, you can, of course, visit the map at DARWIN200.com. And you can take a look at some of the images. We have here a little chalkboard welcoming everybody on board for the Mangareva to Papeete leg, and then a few little video clips too of some of the sailing. Looks like there is some wind, so that's good. All right, and then here looks like some weather too. If I bump this up a little bit, see a little bit wet there on deck. All right, now if I come back here from this screen share, there we go. With any luck, we're going to head onto the deck of that aforementioned ship, the Oosterschelde, where they are sailing. Let's see if Tom and Maria are there. I think they can hear me, so let's bring them in. Hey, Tom. Hey, Maria.
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Looks like you've got some blue sky and a little bit of wind today.
Yeah,
We've
it's
got
getting
blue
better.
sky, but wind in the wrong direction.
Oh, that's no good. You're under motor then.
Yeah, none of the sails are up at the moment, but if you can see.
All right, fair enough.
In the middle of the night, but they will come back up. They say in about a day.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Maria, we just kind of got to meet you briefly in our last event. So for anybody who's tuning in new today, do you want to take a second to introduce yourself?
My name is Maria, and I am from Denmark, Copenhagen, and I'm a professional diver, or scientific diver. I was so lucky and fortunate to join this trip for the coral transects. One of my specialties is working underwater in different environments, and out here, probably one of my favorite environments is the coral reef.
All right. And so when we left off, you and Tom were on the ship, and you had tracked down some here, and you were about to get into the water. So how did that go?
It was amazing. The journey to the actual diving part was quite as fun as well. There was no dive center in Mangareva because it is in the middle of nowhere. But there was one guy called Fred, the mysterious Fred, who supposedly had some tanks. And I spent the day walking around on the island and talking to people. And then at one point, somebody got hold of Fred, and the next morning, behold, we had tanks delivered to the port. So it kind of just fanned out really nicely. We have so many pearl farms around in Mangareva, and we wanted to go and dive around them to see if they had any impact on the environment. And I was a little bit dubious if we were allowed to, but everybody was super kind and sailed us out. One of the pearl fishers sailed us out to his own little coral reef where we got to dive. It's so amazing.
All right, very cool. Well, I do have some images here. Tom sent me some images, so I'm going to start this share screen. And maybe we can talk through some of them and learn a little bit more about, what you got to see.
That's preparing at the first dive site we went to, down in Kimmery Bay.
Yeah. Yes. So this bay is packed with pearl farming nets, and this is by the house of one of the pearl farmers on land. And he was so kind to take us on his boat out to the pearl nets. I think there will be a picture of that in a little while.
Yeah. Sorry guys, the wind's just a little strong. Are we able to either turn the computer a little or maybe get a little closer to the boat? I don't know if the wind, it might be coming from the wrong direction, the block.
How about now? Is it better?
That's an improvement, yeah.
Okay, nice.
Great. Now let us know.
I said that and now the wind's gutting us again.
All right. Should we move over there or inside maybe?
Where is the wind coming? It's straight in front of us.
Yeah.
So we can sit down there.
All right. We'll
Yeah, okay.
On the floor. Hopefully this works.
Was that better?
Oh yeah, definitely.
All
Awesome.
right.
Yeah.
Great. Great.
So you tracked down this Fred guy and he had scuba gear. Was it pretty good condition? Pretty good stuff?
We just got his tanks, and
Okay.
one of the things that you're taught when you become a diver is to check the air in your tank. There's not supposed to be any smell, and the O-ring should be fine, and there's several checks to go through. And we did. Definitely, it was okay.
Yeah.
It was okay. For where we were, I was quite impressed with the conditions. We brought our own diving equipment, so it was just the tanks that we needed.
Okay. Let's take a look here at a few more images.
Yeah, this is the pearl farmer. He was fairly young and he just started taking up pearl farming a couple of months ago. He was originally from the island but was staying in Tahiti for most of his life, and now he returned to get part of this pearl industry, which is huge out here.
I think it's the second largest industry in the whole of French Polynesia.
Yeah, it is.
Next to tourism.
Next to tourism, true. These are the pearls or the oysters. So they have 3 steps they go through. First, they have the they call it the oyster primal, which is like the mother pearl or mother oyster, and she will detach some eggs, and these eggs will then float down onto these plastic fringy things. It looks like foxtails. And then the eggs sit there, and then they move the eggs when they start growing into little oysters. They move them into these little netty kind of things, almost like in the background. And then once they've grown a couple of centimeters, they then take them out and put them into what you see on the photo here, these plastic nets. And they sit there for 1 year to 2 years. 1 oyster is 1 pearl. So above me on this picture, there are many oysters and many pearls.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are you doing here, Maria? Are you taking some measurements?
Yes. So study number 6 of the DARWIN200 is the coral transect. And basically, we are measuring up the reef in particular spots that we can find again to, first of all, see the diversity on the reef between the corals and also the marine life. And then we use it as a comparison measure, or baseline, you would call it. Whenever there's a chance to go back and remeasure the reef, we will be able to see if it has developed in the positive or negative direction, but also coral bleaching and marine life. So basically, this is a 10-meter long measuring tape, and we're just swimming on top of it, filming it first, and then afterwards we take pictures for each meter, and then we can stitch it all together afterwards.
Okay. So this must be some of those pearls?
Yep. This was the pearl farmer. Actually, this was from the farm we were on the next day.
Yeah, the second one.
The second one. The bag that I have in my hand is for export. I can't remember how many million pearls they said they had a year, but it was
something crazy.
Crazy amount of pearls, yeah. But they're beautiful. They're very special out here because they are black. The black Tahitian pearl, and that's got something to do with the cold of the water and the depth of the water.
Very cool. Here's a closer look at some of them. Different shapes too. They're not all perfectly spherical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like the categories of what determines the quality of them. So like the more round the actual pearl is, the more valuable they are.
Yeah, he was explaining the different pearls. I picked out a few that I would like to bring home from this farm because we were diving on it. I thought it was interesting. And I took yellow and white and gray and all these soft shades, and then a few of the black ones. And he was laughing at me saying, "I'm not a professional, Maria, or you are not a professional," because apparently it is the black ones that were unique. But I found the white ones was just as incredible, and that's what we were
Sure.
doing right now.
Yeah, very cool. And it looks like you got to go out a little bit as well, a little kayaking, not just under the
Yes,
water.
this was amazing. So the same guy on this farm, his family has several farms out in this little bay. So we borrowed some of the kayaks, and Tom and I sailed out to the first pearl farm, the pearl farm of his cousin. And it was Saturday, and they don't work on Saturdays, so we thought it would be a good opportunity to go and look a little bit closer on these farms. And then a rainstorm hit us, and we got on board and walked inside for shelter. And we were fortunate enough to find a whole family in there. So we ended up having an amazing time talking to this young pearl farmer and his family about pearl farming. We got a really nice interview done with him that Tom will be using later on for the film that we're doing for it. But we got to see the whole process of the oyster pearls and how they plant a little oyster inside the oyster, or not a little oyster. They insert part of a clam, the Mississippi clam. So they have these perfect little clam shells, and then they put that very, very briefly and fast into this little oyster, and then the oyster is going to cover this other pearl with its own mother pearl. Sorry, it's a bit noisy in the background, but they just caught the fish for the dinner. So
Oh, very cool. That is exciting.
Yeah,
very cool. So this, see a few more pictures here of where you were talking about, and then this must be where you stopped. Yeah,
that's the one. I think we actually may have woken up the family. the guy walked out the building with quite red eyes.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's funny. So a lot of their gear here. Some of the looks like maybe some spear guns in that previous picture. This looks like some of the gear we saw underwater before.
Exactly. And the concern about these pearl farms at the moment is that all the gear is made out of plastic, but quite brittle plastic. And it keeps going back in the ocean and then up on land and sitting in the sun and back and forth. So it slowly just starts to deteriorate. And we've been speaking to quite a few people out here because, of course, there's a concern about microplastics all over the oceans. But the government out here is trying to tackle the problem and make new types of nets out of either coconut or was it bamboo or hemp?
Not quite sure. Yeah. Biodegradable plastics and stuff like that.
Biodegradable, yeah.
And this must be the family you had a little visit with.
Yeah, they were amazing. Super nice people.
Oh, that's so cool. Very cool. And I know we have a few pictures to wrap up. Are these the oysters themselves, Maria, or are these the smaller clams you were talking about?
No, these are the oysters themselves, and you can see what they're sitting on is this collector material they talk about. So that's these plastic threads, and they sit there for a couple of months, and then they grow a little bit bigger, and then they get picked off by off this little net thing and put into the big grids that you saw. They're super, super sharp, and it's actually quite a dangerous job they're doing because they'll go out in all sorts of high seas, working with these heavy nets and currents and what have you. This here was the second farm that we got to. We paddled out with the kayaks, and then Tom and I were doing the transect. You can see the measuring tape over the corals here.
Yep.
And it was so interesting to see the difference from the corals in one bay to the other bay. Here, the corals are in absolute pristine condition. There's no coral bleaching. There are some coral patches that was under human impact in the sense of actual collision to the corals, either dropping these natural anchors, which is just a huge concrete block on top of the corals, or letting these nets drift and then get attached to the coral reef. But the coral reef itself is in a spectacular condition. I was very happy after these hours in the water because it really lifted the spirit. But we find it's quite interesting to have this transect done because coming back to this pearl farm in a few years will definitely show what direction the oceans are going in this part of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a few more shots of that coral.
Yeah, that's the broken coral. That's the human impact we were talking about. And we were very concerned because in the beginning when we were walking around talking with people, it seemed that they were not very aware of this situation of plastic or aware of the impacts. But later on, we spoke with with a school teacher, and he's talking. He was telling us how the children are very aware of the environment out here, and very aware that they need to protect the oceans around them because it is their future. There's not much else you can do out there, Mangareva.
Yeah.
There's hardly any tourism, so it's pearl farming, and that's it.
Yeah. And then here's some more action shots.
Yeah, it's quite incredible to see, and it's also funny to see the fish that then feed off this. On the other farm, there was these massive remora. Sorry, my English.
Yeah.
These massive remora fish that you normally see hang around on whale sharks or larger pelagics. They were hanging underneath this farm, feeding from it. So, but here you can obviously see quite a lot of plastic pollution.
Damage, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. More under there, yeah.
Yeah. But there is definitely there's definitely happening a change in the mentality out here. The new generation are very aware of the problems the world is facing. So we expect that with the education they're getting, it will become more and more sustainable because they can't do without. This is the livelihood they have.
Yeah. And so as we look at some of these pictures, we saw a little bit of the coral. We saw obviously these farms. We can see the plastic. This is our final picture. What was the marine life like? Were there sharks, turtles, fish? What was the marine life like?
In one bay, the first one we were in, only tiny, small, like the medium-sized coral fish. We didn't find crabs. We didn't find the little nudibranchs or the smaller part of the feeding chain, and also we didn't see any from the bigger part of the feeding chain. So jacks and barracudas and sharks, we didn't see those there. But then in the other bay, the corals were much more diverse, and so was the coral marine life. I mean, so it's quite obvious that the healthier reef you have, the healthier the diversity of the marine creatures are.
Yeah. And Tom, what was your week like? Good to be in the water? Any challenges filming? I hope no flooded cameras, that kind of stuff.
No, it was a great week because I started off working with Jut, so I was going around to all the different islands looking for invertebrates, and that was one experience. For everything from giant centipedes to beaches full of pigs, and then finished the week with Maria jumping in the water, seeing what Mangareva was like under the surface, and so yeah, super nice to be able to get like that larger view of what Mangareva is like.
Yeah. And how's since you've left the island, how's the sailing been so far?
I've been seasick nonstop.
Oh no.
Yes, truly. But starting to feel a little bit better. The sea is, I don't think the Siemens would call it rough, but definitely my body was calling it rough. But so interesting, Sal. It's a beautiful ship, huge sails. She's stunning on the water, and she's carrying us onwards on the journey. We know when we go to the next port, Tom and I are going to continue the transects in different areas, and they will be quite different from what we saw in Mangareva. So we're very excited to compare the different parts of French Polynesia together on the water.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, Tom and Maria, thank you so much for letting us steal some time. I know it was a little disjointed with the Starlink acting up, but it looks like you learned a lot. You got to meet some great people, and you got to see kind of both sides. You saw the healthy reefs in some areas, and then in other spots you saw maybe some of the negative impacts of the pearl industry, and getting those transects is really going to help kind of that baseline for the future to see what things are like in a few years.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, enjoy the fresh fish tonight, and we'll hopefully see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, see you next week.
So as I mentioned, each week over the summer, we're trying to host a different Darwin leader to showcase the conservation work that they were able to do in the different countries that the DARWIN200 has visited. And so, like I mentioned, Daniel Cáceres Bartra is going to join us in just a moment. He is from Peru, and he was able to spend time in Chile in Concepcion. So let me see if I can get Daniel in here with us, if he's ready. Hey, Daniel, you're back there?
Hello, Joe. How are you doing? I'm very good here in Peru right now.
All right, that's great, Daniel. Is now a good time to talk, Daniel, or do you need a couple minutes?
Yeah, I'm perfect.
Okay, perfect. Well, Daniel, I think the best thing to do is start off, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel Cáceres, Bartra. I'm actually going to put my camera this way. I think it will look better. I am from Peru. I was a Darwin leader in Talcahuano, Chile. I'm a marine biologist. I'm a diving instructor also. And sorry, it's a little bit cold. I'm a diving instructor also. I work in conservation. I worked in a lot of projects in regards with reefs, with humpback whales. I've been in a couple projects with whale sharks, and also been a lot in the negotiating world, in the ocean conservation negotiating world. So I'm very happy to be here, and I was very excited to be able to see and explore the species that I got to explore that you guys will see pretty soon.
All right. Well, Daniel, why don't you set the scene for us? Tell us a little bit about the project you worked on, and then maybe we'll take a look at the video and have some more questions.
Great. So actually, I had the amazing privilege of seeing the smallest marine sea mammal, which is the sea otter, the South American sea otter, Lontra felina. And I think it's an amazing species to see because it's also one of the latest marine mammals to have evolved and actually to have ended up in my continent. So I mean, studying this marine mammal was a really intrigue and ambitious goal because there's also relative little information on regards to many of its aspects, but being able to see the past of it, seeing its evolution and how it arrived eventually in Chile and Peru because that's where its distribution range is, and then seeing its present problems and how it has changed, and then seeing its future issues and how we can prevent this species from disappearing because this vulnerability that it has was something really good. So I would like for you to see the video, and then I think I will go in a little bit more details afterwards. But I really had an amazing time specifically learning from the story about the sea otter, and you guys will see how we as a species, we're actually like, as humans, we're just starting to understand ecological concepts. I mean, we just started to understand the diversity of the change, of the constant change theory from Darwin in 1858. The knowledge, for example, that we all came from single organisms, and how we are constantly changing and evolving. It's concepts that are relatively new. So actually finding out the story of the sea otter that's just actually been in my continent and became a species less than 1 million years ago was something very, very good. And how actually in less than 200 years, so many problems have started to arise that are putting its population on the line. So yeah, I will leave you, Joe, for that to be able to present the video.
All right, let's cue that up, and then we will definitely get into a little deeper with you. So here we go. This should come up right now.
The first mammals appear in land around 150 million years ago. The first mammals just lived in land. They didn't live in the marine ecosystems. But then around 60 million years ago, things changed, and the first marine mammals started to appear. And they were the cetaceans, or the whales that we know of today. And then the sirenids, like some of the manatees that we know of. And based on the fossil record, we know now that some of the sirenids even appeared all the way down here in Chile. But then when the cold Humboldt current that was a barrier appeared, it killed off most of the sirenids. So that's why there are not any of them here today now. But then around 15 million years ago, the first mustelids appear. The mustelids are basically most of the otters we know of today. Hello, I'm Daniel Cáceres Bartra from Peru, and I'm in Talcahuano with the DARWIN200 project doing the research on sea otters.
So the first mustelids that appear were the weasel, like the beginning of the mammals. They were completely terrestrials, but over time, they started evolving to become aquatic, and that's where the otters came in. And then afterwards, around 5 million years ago, the first sea otters appeared and became mostly fully aquatic. While the freshwater otter spends less than 70% of their time in the water, the sea otters can spend more than 70% of their time in the water. And all this happened from Asia to North America. That was a route. Back then, South America was not connected to North America continent. And that was mainly because the Panama Isthmus was not created yet. And it was not until 3 million years ago, where the Panama Isthmus completely closed, then the sea otters were able to migrate down and evolve into the smallest sea otter that we currently know, which is the smallest marine mammal yet inland. And that is the lontra felina, or the chungungo, that we have been studying. The lontra felina, the chungungo, is a marine otter that is highly adaptable. As we can see, its hind legs have webbed feet so they can swim around. They have large, efficient kidneys for osmoregulation, large volumes of blood so they can have oxygen storage, and also large volumes of lungs for flotation. Highly adaptive eyes for the salt water, and overall a thick bones so they can have good swimming abilities to be able to catch their food. But one of the most interesting things is that most of the marine mammals evolved with a thick layer of blubber for insulation. But that didn't happen with the marine otters. They actually have the densest fur yet because they have underhairs that interlock to trap air for insulation. The marine sea otter, or chungungo, became a very important species in this area from Argentina to Peru throughout the many hundreds of thousands of years. They became a keystone species, which means that they became more important than other species in maintaining the health of the ecosystem they lived in. Because with their size that could go up to more than 1 meter, with their weight that can go from 3 kilograms to 5 kilograms, and with their diving abilities that could reach all the way down to 40 meters, they were able to control the populations of herbivores in the area by eating the crustaceans, some fish, and some mollusks even. And with this, helping the algae grow to safe levels. But even before human arrives, they had predators that would compete and attack them usually. And those were some of the orcas that would eventually reach close to the shore areas or to the areas where they would swimming, because the sea otters would spend around 70% of the time in the ocean. And also some juveniles used to be caught by birds. And then they had the sharks that used to love frenzying on small marine mammals that lived in the area. And that's why the sea otters adapted themselves to the rocky ecosystems where they would prefer caves that were a little bit higher than the high tide would reach. And sometimes they would use the sandy beaches to move from rocky areas to another. The first humans arrived in the Americas around 20,000 years ago, and in Chile around 15,000 years ago. The first human settlers in the area, they didn't consume most marine mammals, but it did resource the ones that were really close to the rocky areas, specifically the sea lion and the sea otter. They even used the sea lion with their hide as rafts for fishing in that area. And then afterwards, other human settlers from that area, they used to use dead whales for consumption. Back then, there were more chungungos or sea otters than humans. Then we moved to the 16th centuries when the Spaniards arrived. The Spaniards used Chile as a sailing way, so they used to see the animals for consumption and also for hide, skin, and oil, specifically from the whales and the sea lions. Then humans started settling in the terrestrial areas, creating a demand for internal meat consumption. And then afterwards, our friendly sea otter became part of a horrible scheme. They were being hunted for fur to the European countries, and that's where most of the population started to diminish. And it was not until 1782 that a Chilean Jesuit, Ignacio Molina, described to the world and gave it an official name to the sea otter, the Lontra felina, meaning the sea cat, like they called it in Chile. And it was not until the year 1950, less than a century ago, that hunting, killing sea otters was finally banned by Supreme Decree number 751. Join us for the next episode where we will see the current threats of the sea otter and where we will meet some of the main actors behind the conservation and research of them.
All right, let's get Daniel back in here. Daniel, that's a great first video. It looks like it came together really well.
Yes, thank you. I really wanted to show that the story of most of the animals that we study started way before the species itself.
Yeah. And the environment you were in, the coast, looked absolutely spectacular.
Yes, Talcahuano has been it's that part of the Americas, of the continent, is relatively new compared to other parts of the continents. That's why it's still so rocky, because the ocean still has not eroded it into sandy beaches yet. So it's still very rocky area, and still the Humboldt Current is very, very present. So it's very cold,
Yeah.
but we enjoyed it a lot.
So I know in the future videos, you talk more about the threats to conservation. You talk about the future, but can you give us a sneak peek? What are some of the threats that the sea otters are facing now?
Okay, so like I mentioned in the video, like in the beginning when the sea otter appeared, less than a million years ago, that it became a species, and then it went all the way down to Chile. We don't know exactly at what moment the sea otter arrived in Chile. And actually the hypothesis now is that either it was a marine sea otter that evolved all the way down to and went all the way down to Chile, or it was actually a an aquatic sea otter from the rivers that evolved into the marine sea otter. But like I mentioned at the beginning, there were more marine sea otters when it became a species than humans, because humans actually arrived in Chile around 15,000 to 20,000 years ago. But also our population has been growing a lot in the past 15,000 years. And then as our population was growing, we were hunting them. And then we have been reducing the populations, and then the market for the fur started. So the population reduced more and more often, and it was actually banned in 1958. But still, we still have current issues from there, because as our population, human population grows, because we're also part of the ecosystem, range of distribution also grows. So that's an ecological concept also. As our population, human population is growing, our range of distribution is also amplifying. And what's happening with that? So we're putting less space for sea otters to actually live on the beaches and live on the ecosystems, and that's actually reducing their habitat. And with that, with our population growing, we're bringing pollution, we're bringing plastic, but also something else. One, there's a couple species that have actually benefited from our presence, and that's other type of exotic species beside us, like the dogs, for example, and cats. Dogs and cats are one of the reasons that sea otter populations are diminishing, because dogs, for example, go out and hunt the sea otters around there. Another, there's a pollution, the plastic pollution that's occurring, that's very massive. Also motorized vehicles that go in there, and even still some hunting that occurs from humans from time to time. So there's still many needs that we have in there.
All right. Well, Daniel, tell us a little bit about your time in the field. Were you able to get into the water? Were you able to observe them for a period of time? What was your field time like?
Well, we were in Caleta Chome. Caleta Chome was actually the last place where whale hunting occurred. in this part of South America. And so it was a very interesting community that has changed from extractivism, a lot of extractivism, to more tourism. So that shift was interesting. I was able to get in the water. It was the coldest water I've ever been to, but it was enjoyable, pleasurable actually. From the time I was able to see the Chungungo, it was very hard to record, and we have Josh, who was my cameraman, with a really heavy camera, and we were trying to do snorkeling because the sea otter there was just like at the superficial level. Some of them were resting. We had a couple shots where the sea otter was going into their caves, and we were with Andrea Cisterna Concha, which is one of the top specialists from sea otters in south of Chile, and they had identified a couple of the sea nests. So we were going around to the places where she knew there was some nesting and some caves where the sea otters were living. So it was a wonderful time. A lot of time swimming, a lot of time in the water, a lot of time in the boat. Also, we had a boat from Fernanda also. Silva, who she was in tourism. She's a young leader from Caleta Chome, who she let us use her boat to go look around for the sea otter, and that was a great time. We also saw sea lions. It was very windy, and but a lot of biodiversity, and I'm pretty sure that it looked very similar to what Darwin saw when he arrived in Port Talcahuano.
All right, very cool, Daniel. Well, we'll get one more question from you, and then we'll let you carry on with your day. And that is, the future, the outlook. I'm wondering, is the local community excited about sea otters being around, and do things look good right now for their population?
The population is recovering, but our population is growing. So right now there is a point. I mean, there is a couple lobby proposals, for example, of completely. I mean, we can. One of the things that I meant to talk about in the video is that we always talk about, for example, protecting the species directly. Like, I mean, it's already illegal to kill sea otters, but you cannot protect the species if you don't protect its habitat. So right now it's illegal to kill sea otters, for example. So it's like great. So the population should recover. But wait a second, we're protecting the species, but we're not protecting the habitat. Our species is growing, our population is growing, so we need to leave some spaces for only nature to live. So only nature to thrive. We need spaces that are exclusively designed for sea otters to live, for birds to nest. So one of the things that I propose is the need for no take and no use marine protected areas, which which is actually just letting the habitat be the way it was before humans arrived. Just letting areas of no human presence at all, which is some of the things that we need in there also. And because we also need to, for the coastal areas, to have dog population control. Like I mentioned, dogs are an invasive species. They are an exotic species. They're not a native species, so they're disrupting not only sea otter populations but other type of populations. So every coastal community should have laws to prevent dogs, and that's the reason why dogs should not be able to be allowed on the beach unless they're with a leash, to protect it from actually affecting habitat itself. We should also take care of the water that's arriving there. There's a river right next to Caleta Chome, um, from that it's going there, and it's very polluted. So when it's very polluted, it's affecting the population of the herbivores of the plants and vegetation where the sea otter thrives, the sea urchin population. And also there's another thing, which is a local economy, which is the macroalgae, Macrocystis perifera, and another one species which is a pardo microalgae, which is the brown microalgae, that it's being used for local economical activity. So there needs to be policy there that guarantee that the extraction of the of the of the basic resource that provides the food for the sea otter doesn't get diminished also in the population. So when we need to talk about protecting the species, we need to also talk about protecting the habitat of the species, and that's what we talk about in the future.
All right, Daniel. Absolutely, you're dead on. If we protect those keystone species, those umbrella species, we give them enough space, that protects a whole lot of other species that use that same ecosystem. So, absolutely, if we can protect the sea otters, that's just going to help the entire ecosystem as well, if they have enough space and resources. Daniel, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us today. I know you're out and about and a busy guy. I really appreciate getting to know you a little bit and to learn about some of the conservation work that you were able to do while you were down there in Chile.
Thank you so much, Joe. Very happy to be here, and I invite you everyone to read on the Darwin Diaries, and because The reason why it's Darwin 200 is because Darwin has really shifted our paradigm and our vision for how we see the world and how we perceive ourselves, which is essential to talk about in the future policies that we need. We're the first generation to actually understand those concepts. So we need to make sure that they're comprehended everywhere. Thank you so much, Joe.
All right. Thanks, Daniel. Have a great rest of the day. We're going to wrap up with our curiosity of the week. So last week you were left with a curiosity from Stu. Let's take a look at the answer to that curiosity.
Back, everyone. Could you guess the answers to last week's questions? If you remember, I asked you to try and find out the name of this strange little plant with leaves that sparkle with droplets of glue. And also, could you guess why the plant has these droplets of glue and what they're for? Well, many of you sent in lots of answers, and quite a lot of you got it correct. It's called a sundew, or its scientific name is Drosera adelae. This particular species occurs from the north of Australia, but there are hundreds of species of sundews that occur right the way around the world and live in wetlands in tropical and temperate areas. These beautiful droplets of glue inspire the name sundew because they shimmer and sparkle just like drops of dew on the leaves in the morning. But they actually have a bit of a sinister purpose. This plant is carnivorous. It eats insects and other small animals. What happens is these beautiful sparkling droplets of glue shimmer and shine in the light. Have you ever seen moths or other insects attract to lights at night? Well, many insects are actually attracted to light sources. And that's exactly the case with these beautiful shimmering leaves of the sundew. Bugs get stuck on the leaves, and in many species, including this one, the leaves slowly curl on all these fine little tentacles wrap round their prey. The plant then releases enzymes and digestive juices, and then breaks down the body of the insect stuck to the leaves. Then it absorbs the resulting nutrients directly through its leaves. And through these adaptations, it's able to live in really barren habitats where regular non-carnivorous plants often can't survive. So, if you guessed a carnivorous sundew that uses these droplets of sticky glue to catch bugs, your answer was absolutely correct, and well done.
All right, so there we go. There is our answer from last week's curiosity. It was a sundew, or carnivorous plants. In a few past episodes of the World's Most Exciting Classroom, we learned that Stu really studied carnivorous plants, has traveled all over the world, discovered many new species, written books about them. So there's no surprise that one of our latest curiosities is in fact another species of those carnivorous plants. Let's take a look at this week's challenge, this week's curiosity.
Welcome back, everyone. This week's curiosity is to identify this fossil on this little rock here. Shapes like this occur in rocks in many places around the world, especially here in Europe. They're very distinctive, often a cone shape with this intricate pattern. Your question for this week's curiosity is, can you guess what type of animal this fossil represents? What is this called? Send in your answers to classroom@darwin200.com for a chance to win a £50 Amazon gift voucher. We'll find out the answer next week. Good luck, and thank you for taking part.
All right, there we go. Our curiosity of the week. It is a fossil, but what is it a fossil of? As Stu said, you want to send in an answer to classroom@darwin200.com. You've got 1 week to do a little bit of research and send in your answer. All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. It was great to meet Daniel, a young Darwin leader from Peru. He spent his time in Concepcion in Chile, working on the sea otter project. And so we got to check out his first video and learn a little bit more about what he did in the field. Huge shout out to Tom and Maria joining us from the Oosterschelde, where we heard them celebrating the catch of a fish in the background. So it'll be fresh fish on board tonight. And then we got to see the work that Maria was doing beneath the waves in Mangareva. And we got to see kind of both sides. We got to see some more pristine, healthy reef. And then we got to see some reef that's being impacted by that growing of the pearls. And so Maria collected some of that baseline data to add to our exploration of coral around the world. So before we sign off for today, we need to end with a thank you to our sponsors. our partners, without whom we wouldn't be doing live events like the world's most exciting classroom. We wouldn't be sailing around the world conducting the research that Maria is doing right now. And we wouldn't have Darwin leaders like Daniel in the field and getting skills for their future conservation careers. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. And we will wrap up with a little thank you to our sponsors.